Welcome back. In this video, we're going to cover the basic functionality of the new schedule page. The schedule page is a replacement of the timeline page. So if the schedule page is enabled, the timeline page will be hidden. And we will walk through the capabilities with the new schedule page and provide suggestions on how to build out the schedule. So in this example, we have Project Alpha and it had 2 milestones. If you have a project that previously had milestones associated with it, when you convert to the schedule functionality, those milestones will appear on the project schedule. There are some very important notes to keep in mind. The project timeline is by default set to a manual schedule. We would strongly recommend that you look at the user guide to understand the distinction between a manual schedule and an auto schedule. Auto schedule takes into account task dependencies and looks at the earliest start, the latest finish, etc. Because that functionality did not exist with the timeline page, we've released the schedule page, but in order to preserve the start date and finish date of your project during the conversion, the WBS1, which is labeled project timeline, is set to manual schedule, meaning even though you may have activities and tasks underneath it, it will preserve the original start and finish dates, and we will cover how to update this in a moment. So with the schedule page, we can add tasks, we can edit tasks, delete tasks. It's very important. We need to save all changes. We can expand and contract or collapse our activities. We can zoom in, zoom out, zoom to fit. And if there are baselines, we can display the baselines. Within the schedule page, we have the work breakdown structure column, the name, start date, the end date, the duration, the percent complete, predecessors and successors. And we'll walk through how to update these. I think the best way to go about building the schedule, you can right click on a row. This brings up another window where you can edit, and we'll cover the edit functionality momentarily. You do have the option to copy and paste or cut and paste. You can specifically indent, outdent, or add dependencies, which we'll cover later. But in this example, I want to create a new phase. So I'm going to create a subtask. You could just as easily add a task below, but and I'll explain why we won't do that and what the recommendations are. So when we create a new subtask, give us a name for new task 1. By default, it will inherit the duration and the dates of the task above it. The great thing about the scheduler is that we can manually drag and drop. We can move things around if needed, but in this case, I'm going to shorten the duration. You could just as easily click into these cells. Maybe I want to make this 90 days. I'm going to right click again, and then rather than creating another subtask, I'm going to simply add a task below. That's going to create task number 2. And let's go ahead and name these phase 1, phase 2. And if we need to, I'm actually going to shrink this further. Need to, we can rename this. We'll call this the planning phase. And I can drag and drop. In this case, I'm going to drag the milestone and I'm going to draw a dependency. So for those of you familiar with more traditional project management tools, you have the ability to create dependencies between tasks like finish to start to start, or finish to finish. There are different ways to go about doing this. I think the easiest is to use the drag and drop mechanism to create the dependency. So in this case, I'm hovered over the endpoint and I'm going to draw. You'll notice that it says invalid until I get to something that is valid. And so I'm going to draw the milestone, the dependency with the milestone. In this case, I'm just going to slide it back. So if I need to, I can move it out into the future. There's nothing pinning it. I'm going to move it back so that it has to finish after the planning phase. That's our planning phase complete. And in this case, I'm going to continue and I'm going to draw a relationship that the phase 2 cannot begin until the planning is complete. And let's just say that we're going to create a simple schedule. I'm going to bump this out, say 60 days, and then phase 2 is going to be, we'll call it 130 days. And so in this case, maybe we want to get exact to our original duration, and you'd have to then massage the numbers. But in this case, I'm comfortable with this. This is 190 days, and I'm going to draw another finish to start with the go live date. And at this point, let's just save for the first time. Now you'll notice though that if we had to extend, then my actual true finish date is now at September, beyond the original date of the project. Perhaps these dates came from your proposal through the work intake process, and now you're doing the detailed planning. It's going to take a little bit longer than expected. If we are ready to update row number 1, the project timeline, we can go to Edit. And in the Edit screen, we can see 4 different pages plus a notes page where we can do editing of the name, and we can edit duration. If you put in a start date and finish date, you will put in constraints. So be mindful. Take a look at the user guide for more information about date constraints, but you can create common date constraints. Then we've got the predecessor page. This is the parent activity, so we don't see any predecessor successor. But then at the advanced page, there are the different constraint types. We're not going to cover this in this video, but you'll notice that there's a checkbox for manually scheduled. And so let's move this window out of the way. And once we deselect that, it's going to convert to auto schedule. Auto schedule means that it takes into account all the key task dependencies, and it will take the earliest start and the latest finish in the project. This is typically what project managers want. But because of the nature of converting from the original Acuity timeline to the new schedule page, we needed to leave the project timeline as manually scheduled. That way you would preserve the dates while you're editing the sub details. But since we have completed building a very simplistic schedule, now I'm going to deselect the manual schedule, and you're going to notice that this gray bar is going to extend automatically. And I'm going to hit apply. And now if we were to continue changing things, our project schedule has been extended. I'll hit the save button again. It'll preserve and save the dates. That save button is important because this information will then update your resource plan if you are using resource planning. It will update the information page with the start and finish date. It will update the status report, and we'll go to the status report in a moment. It will also update the roadmap. So there are a lot of places in the system where this date information is utilized, and the save button is critical. If you happen to make a change and you're about to go to a different page, so let's actually do that. We're going to extend this out just a little bit. And then I want to go to the status report page to show some other functionality. It's going to say you have unsaved changes. Do you want to save them? And we'll click OK. Great, so it's saved. So there is a warning if you have unsaved changes. Reason we're coming to the status report temporarily is because within the system, we have the ability to have color-coded milestones and milestone descriptions. This layout is utilized on the status report page and the roadmap page. So there is a distinction between the schedule page against the status report page and the roadmap. The roadmap and the status report look very similar. It's a milestone timeline. As such, if you want to update the color coding of a milestone, you must come to the status report page, double click on the milestone. It will give you the ability to change. Your options may look different, but you can change the color code of the milestone and provide a milestone description. You'll notice that the name and the plan date is grayed out because that can only be edited from the schedule page. But in order to enable the color coding, we enabled an edit from the status report timeline. So I will go back to the schedule page. So let's say a little bit more about dependencies, and specifically, what do we need to do to delete a dependency? So we can see in this example, we've got very simple finish to start relationships. We can delete dependencies in a couple of different ways. Firstly, I can hover over a dependency and I can click on it. It's going to ask me if I want to delete. I'll say yes. We'll fix all this in a moment. Another way is we can click on two tasks, two or more really, right click, and we can select remove dependencies. Just as easily, we can use a similar technique to chain link multiple tasks together. So in this case, I'm going to actually link all four of these. And this will be a simple finish to start relationship. I'll right click. I'm going to click add dependencies, and I've quickly created a finish to start relationship, which is probably the most common dependency type, and quickly built out that schedule. From here, you can see that the duration, the percent complete, the predecessor, successors. We can update percent complete from this page. Let's say it's 50%. And let's go back then. It'll automatically update the parent activity. And you'll see that the bar has changed to a darker blue. You also can manually edit the percent complete. So if I want to click on that white triangle, you can manually edit the percent complete. And this, of course, will automatically update all the parent activities. Let's take a look at some other functionality. We can certainly create subtasks, or we could create a task below, and then we can indent. So you can either add a subtask or add a task and later indent it. You can outdent it. Let's come back to this notion of WBS number 1. It is possible to create additional tasks. And here I've just created WBS number 2. However, the start date and end date of WBS 1 is what controls the resource plan, status report timeline, and the roadmap. So we strongly recommend do not create WBS 2, 3, 4, 5, etc. Keep everything under WBS 1 so that everything is preserved for the start date, end date. That will be the simplest. You can change baseline dates by clicking on the baseline button. In this case, we did not have baseline start date, finish date. So we're going to start with today's date of February 6th. We're going to add a completion date of November 1st. That's what we're looking at in the schedule. Happens to be a Saturday, but we'll do it anyway. And now we've drawn the baseline. You can hide or display the baseline. You can change the baseline just as you could with the original timeline functionality. If you need to, you can draw additional dependencies through the edit button. If you want to add predecessor-successor relationships, you can do this. Let's click on the add button. I could pick the item that I want to connect with, and we can then designate the 4 types of dependencies. And then finally, we have an option for lag. And so lag and lead are defined in the user guide, but if you want to apply lag, you would enter in a positive number. If you want lead, you would enter in a negative number. This will offset by those number of days against the predecessor-successor relationship. So this functionality applies both to predecessors and successors. And if you happen to have a constraint, again, more information is covered in the user guide, you could apply it here. So by default, almost everything is starting earlier than, but you can adjust if needed. You've got all the standard constraint types. So there you have it. This is an overview of the new functionality of the schedule page. If you have any questions, reach out to support@acuityppm.com.